So today's the day that Ian Duncan Smith's shake-up of the benefit system really gets going with the introduction of the new universal credit payments. Initially, it will only affect a few claimants in National Underline for now, but it will eventually change things for nearly 8 million people. Deven Ghelani from Policy and Practice is one of the main architects of the new system, and Emma Aldridge is Head of Information and Projects at Turn to Us, a charity which helps people claim benefits and grant. And Deven Ghelani, you had quite a lot of input into this process with Ian Duncan Smith. Yep. What was the reason for that? What were you trying to achieve?
Well, I think we've got a really bizarre benefit system today, and I experienced that myself about 4 years ago when I first claimed. And what we've got is 3 different departments administering a whole range of benefits, each with their own rules. And that makes it incredibly confusing to know what you're entitled to, where you have to go to claim. That's bad enough. At that point, when you move into work, you can find out that, well, actually, for going out there to earn your first job, maybe 10 hours a week, maybe 15 hours a week, you're actually no better off, or barely better off at all. And I think that's a really bizarre benefit system to have. Universal Credit's trying to sweep all of that away, create a much simpler system, so you only have to claim once to claim a whole range of benefits. They'll each have a single set of rules, so you'll always know that for every pound you earn, you'll get to keep a decent chunk of that. Yeah, fundamentally to give that message that you're fundamentally going to be better off in work. And you have to remember the current benefit system doesn't always do that today, and I think that's a travesty.
So in terms of cutting benefit or not cutting benefit, what's the impact of this going to be when it's introduced universally?
It's not really about cutting benefit at all. It's about changing the way the system works. So we've got a system today that too often says to people, makes people ask the question, why work? Now that's an awful benefit system to have in place, and it just fundamentally isn't fit for purpose. Universal Credit's trying to change that system so that regardless of what the level of benefits are, your decision about whether or not you want to work more is always a positive one. Of course I want to work, of course I want to increase my earnings. And that's the kind of benefit system I think we want today and for the long term.
Emma Aldridge, do you accept this isn't about cuts?
I do. I mean, as Deven has pointed out, it is about simplifying the very complicated benefit system. And we know from our research that around £19 billion each year is unclaimed in benefits. The system is very complicated, and that complexity is a barrier to many people to claim benefits. But we are still very concerned about those individuals who are going to be affected, and some research that we recently conducted pointed to the fact that nearly 2 out of 5 people who are going to be affected directly by these changes are really concerned about going into debt, about making it harder for them to budget, because one of the changes will be that payments will be made less frequently. They'll be made on a monthly basis. And for some people, that's a really big adjustment to make.
But isn't that where, if you like, the sort of moral side of this comes in, that what Ian Duncan Smith is trying to say is that people on benefits should behave like people on work, and most people in work these days are paid on a monthly basis?
I think it's. I think people should be making up their own minds and have the ability to make their own choices and make their own decisions.
But most of us don't have the choice as to whether we're paid a weekly wage or a monthly salary or whatever,
that's
do we?
fair, but we're very concerned that during this transition time there will be many, many people who either are not aware that the changes are going to affect them, or that they are deeply concerned about that change to that less frequent form of payments, which will plunge them into debt with, you know, all the consequences that has for them, their household, their children, for example.
And we are talking about the worse off, and making ends meet for a month is presumably more difficult than making them meet for 7 days.
Well, it's not so much about morality. I'd say it's much more about independence and promoting independence. You have to remember that the vast majority of people on universal credit are already in work or have recently lost their job, and they'll manage perfectly well on a monthly budget. They understand how to do that. And I think we've got a benefit system today for those today that struggle, that just simply papers over the cracks, you know, it pays their rent for them, rather than realising that if they were to overcome some of those challenges, at the moment it can act as a barrier to work. So under the current benefit system, when people move into work, all of a sudden they're responsible for paying their rent. And that can actually act as a barrier to work. So it's important to get them to a point whereby you're not just papering over the cracks, you're dealing with the root cause of the problem, which is, you know, you're going to have to budget if you want to progress in life, and starting off with the assumption that people can do these things, because frankly the vast majority can, making sure that there's support available for those that can't and those that struggle.
How many people, what percentage do you reckon can't actually cope with this?
Well, we know that over 2 in 5 people say that they'll find it very difficult to budget and moving to monthly payments. Also, about a quarter of people have told us that they're concerned about debt. And equally, there's the aspect of the online claiming and management. So there's a high proportion of people at the moment who just don't feel very confident about the strength of skill that they would need to manage their claims online and having access to computers.
Yeah, I mean, that is the other thing, that this is moving towards a computerised system, and yet we know, I think, something like 8 million people in this country don't have access to computers.
Yeah, and I think you have to remember that it's the current benefit system is wholly paper-based, and that's hugely inefficient and causes a whole range of problems in itself. So the fact that a lot of people will be able to manage their claim online and make a single online claim, well, that takes a lot of energy and resources out of the system, so you can focus those resources on those that do need support. I mean, just because you have to make a claim online, you don't have to do it all by yourself. You may be able to go to a whole range, your job centre for support, perhaps your local library, perhaps another advice agency to help you make that claim in the same way you would do today with a paper claim.
I mean, there have been complaints made about the claim form, the online claiming process. Do you think it could be made simpler?
Oh, anything that simplifies the system, Turn to Us supports without a shadow of a doubt. We know that the complexity of the system, the complexity of the forms,
and is this
a major
less
barrier.
complex? Is this easier?
It remains to be seen. You know, we're on the first day of a launch of a very small-scale pilot, and Turn to Us will be very interested in keeping an eye on how that's affecting this 19.5 billion pot of unclaimed benefits and whether we're seeing that going down over time, and we certainly hope it will.
Revolutionary?
Yeah, I think we're going from 3 different agencies to 1. That should massively simplify the system. People should always have that message that we're going to be better off in work. I think that is revolutionary. I think it's going to be a massive change for the better for the whole country.
And people who think they're going to be affected by this, what's their advice? Where can they get help?
Well, there's a lot of people out there who will be affected, who perhaps are not sure about when they'll be affected. And Turn to Us has some very simple fact sheets that just spell out who will be affected over what timeline, and some simple steps to get prepared, to get ready. So all the sort of things we've been talking about today, just things that you can think about ahead of time. So budgeting, getting online, getting a bank account, all the things that will stand you in good stead to be able to take universal credit when it comes on.
Thank you both very much.
Thank you.